Finland Church.
And we're live.
Yeah.
Welcome, everybody. It is 30 with Karen and Justin, and Karen has decided to show up today. No, I'm totally kidding. She's totally here, and we're happy to have her. Thank you for coming back. We thought we'd lost you for a bit there.
Never.
Yeah, no. We have a wonderful guest today. We all love wine, I can imagine, especially with the Jays doing what they're doing. Everyone's sitting on the edge of their seats, glass of wine to edge off the little anxiety of what's happening. It's never terrible. We have Tom Pennachetti from Cave Springs Winery here. We appreciate you, Tom.
I'm
Thanks for
happy to
coming.
be here, Justin.
Yeah. So this is a family business for you, which is kind of cool because Karen and I are family, so that's cool. Kind of resonates
hmm
here. Tell me how it was that your family got into the wine business in the first place.
So we were hobby grape growers going way back into the 1960s. My grandfather was an Italian immigrant, and we were in the masonry manufacturing business, actually in Hamilton, not far from you.
Hmm,
And when he retired from the business, we had, uncles and my father and his brothers and my grandfather. All the different households made wine in their cellars the way any red-blooded Italian
of
did,
course,
and
of
still they
course.
still do. And but it became a little more serious. One of my older brothers, Len, who's was really the driving force, had behind us, along with my father, about purchasing some land to get a little more serious about grape growing. That was in the early 1970s. For
Wow.
about 10 years prior to that, we had some small hobby vineyards too, that we made not very good wine from local grapes. That was the time when
It was
like
that
he would bring in,
strong, bitter wine.
yeah, they were made from Labrusca, which were the native, they were clones of native varieties that the early winemakers in the 19th century cloned the wild vines from our Carolinian forests here. And long story short, during Prohibition, those grape varieties became the go-to for making contraband wine that got exported to the US. And because wine was still legal here for medicinal purposes only, of course. And anyway, in the 60s and 70s, as the wine market started to appreciate finer wines in Ontario and Canada generally, and really all of North America, interest grew in exploring what were known as the French American hybrids, which were crosses between European wine grapes and our indigenous ones here, the Labrusca, and then vinifera, which is the real McCoy, the highest quality wine grapes that are all the European varieties that of the ones of those that we grow here now, fast forwarding, principally Riesling, Chardonnay, Cabernet Franc, Pinot Noir, Gamay, all of those varieties are European vinifera. The hybrids that still exist, we don't work with them, but they still are in the market, like Bac Noir and Vidal are fairly well known, but they're less important than the vinifera varieties. So anyway, we were early pioneers experimenting with the vinifera, planted some Riesling and Chardonnay as a trial. My dad and brothers did some research into where to find land that would be optimal for growing vinifera because the challenges of a cooler climate like ours at the time, the experts said you couldn't grow vinifera here.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And our family and a group of other independent growers, some who had come over from Europe, um, the Europeans saw that we were growing peaches and nectarines and plums, and they were like, "Well, if you can grow those varieties, those tender fruits, you can definitely grow vinifera." And they were right in the end. Not without its challenges, of course, like any wine region, but 50 years later, at the speed of wine, it's a very slow process, learning what varieties work best and what sites work best. But here we are. We started out with about maybe 15 acres by the end of the 1970s. And today we farm about 167 or so on the Beamsville Bench up on the hillside of the Niagara Escarpment.
Yeah. So it sounds like you were one of the pioneers of the wine industry in the area in general. Like if you're around for
In
that long.
Niagara.
Yeah,
In
in
Niagara.
Niagara.
hmm Yeah, I would
Yeah.
say so. There were a few driving forces in the early years. I have to give credit to Don Zeraldo, of course, at Enniskillen. He got the first winery permit since Prohibition. There were only like three or four large concerns, bottling houses, really, that were selling wine in the early 1970s. And Zeraldo at Enniskillen, he he's long since retired, but he managed to get the first independent winery permit, and then it took off from there. He had a stable of growers, a couple of German growers in particular who were growing vinifera for him. And at the same time, we were planting, and Paul Bosket, he just passed away in the last year or so. He he was another driving force in Niagara on the Lake at Chateau des Charmes winery that everybody knows.
Mm.
And they were more focused actually probably on vinifera, so the European wine grapes only. And then ourselves as independent growers, actually a great man who ended up being my father-in-law, Hermann Weiss from the Mosel Valley in Germany, was one of those Europeans that came over and encouraged people to plant his clone of Riesling. He was looking for new markets, and uh, he was responsible for getting the clone that still dominates today of the Riesling grape variety in our region, and it's the most important white variety in the region.
I
Um,
love Riesling.
yeah. And there were others. I can't name them all, but there was like an avant-garde of independent growers ourselves at the time, and some small startup winery people. And then about a decade later, we in the I guess 1986, we formed our winery named after the vineyard. So
Right.
yeah.
Right. It sounds like the Riesling, from what I understand, is probably one of your staple products at this point, no?
Yeah, Cave Spring's really identified with it's our lead variety, and it's
Right.
about 50% of our winemaking. But we over the decades have learned which varieties grow best on our site, and we're blessed with a great site. My father took a chance on the land there at Cave Spring with
Right.
some good research behind it, and it's turned out to be one of the best sites in the region in terms of, protection from all of the usual things that afflict high quality wine growing. The best wine regions everywhere are all, we would say, quote unquote, marginal in the sense that they have growing seasons that are just long enough and just adapted enough for growing vinifera to make fine wine, right?
Mm.
Some very warm regions make great wine, but not as nuanced and not as detailed. And when you have a cool climate like ours, like that's similar, say, to, the Mosel Valley, or sorry, the Rhine regions in Germany and in Alsace in France, or far north of Italy, or Burgundy, famously in Champagne, et cetera, in France. These are all regions that are cool climates, and that's where you can make the most nuanced wines. And it's been a long learning process, but we've basically settled in ourselves on about six varieties that are at the core. Riesling number one, Chardonnay and Cabernet Franc, distant but kind of tied for second in our portfolio. Cabernet Franc being the red, of course. And then after that, we have Pinot Noir, Gamay, and Pinot Gris. And we grow a tiny bit of Gewürztraminer, which I would not consider a core variety in our region. It's a challenging one,
Mm.
but we still have an
It's like
acre
for
of
fun.
that.
Let's just
It's
figure this out.
it's a fun. It's a sandbox wine.
That's funny.
Yeah, yeah.
You've been around so long. Was there a moment along the way early on or somewhere in the middle where you were like, we can make this work? Like, was there kind of a watershed moment where this is going to turn into something?
Well, there was a moment we planted our first vines in the late 1970s, our vinifera, um, so the European varieties that we work with today, and we had what was called in the area the Christmas Day Massacre in at Christmas of 1980, which was really hard on the region because every kind of 8 to 10 years we get a hard frost in the area, very similar to what happens in regions in Europe. And so, like, just a few years into it for us, we got hit with one of those frosts. So that was sobering. It was a slap in the face.
Right.
Um, but the vines quickly adapted and came back. You lose some crop for a year, and it's not as though the vineyard is killed. It's just you lose your crop, and that was a wake up call. And we realized that, yeah, these are challenging to grow,
Mm.
but over again, I'll use the word speed of wine a lot. Like, it's not a matter of months. Like a brewer is making a new batch of beer every day. So he might make 365, just picking a number, batches of beer in a year. We get one chance with wine, right? You grow the grapes, you pick them, and you make your wine. So it takes a long time to figure out, um, whether the site you're on and the varieties you're working with are, that you can ripen the grapes. and B, that you can make really, viable wine.
Mm.
So after I'd say we're selling our grapes to wineries and to home winemakers, which made it pencil out better in terms of the finances because we were selling them directly at higher prices to home winemakers. We took the step in 1986 of starting to make wine, and within 2 or 3 years, we knew, that we could make really good wine. We had a great site, we had the right varieties on the site, and yeah, the winery took off nicely in the 90s after that. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Hmm.
Um, the Ontario wine scene, I think, has probably changed a lot since you started.
Mhm.
What do you think at the moment makes Niagara and its area and that area stand out as it has and actually become one of the worldwide kind of producers of wine that people know worldwide?
I think right now what's happening is that the industry is maturing. We're about, let's call it 50 years in. As a winery, we're 40 years into making wine and 50 plus years growing vinifera. Um, Takes a long time. I, I would argue that, yeah, finding out what the varieties that are best adapted takes a lot of discipline because the temptation by winemakers is to experiment. And a lot of experimentation with varieties that don't belong here has happened. But I think a lot of that is, now what's it, the creative instinct to just kind of experiment madly is starting to be washed out, and people are realizing what grows best and what is most consistent. I feel as though we've
Hmm.
been
Be more
ahead on that.
consistent. Yeah.
Yeah, we've been ahead on that curve. We've always stuck to the varieties that taking the advice of people from similar climates in Europe, the varieties that we figured were best suited for our climate are what we use the word terroir in wine, meaning just the origin point of the wine, the vineyard sites, and the conditions that they give you. So we're learning our terroir, and we've zeroed in on the grapes that we mostly started with, and we're all as vintners in the area trying to learn all the nuances of where you grow your grapes. Some varieties are better in certain areas than others. Those six that we concentrate on all work well in our sites. So I think it's learning and refining your style. For us as a winery, getting a little more detailed, it's really about pushing the boundaries of ripeness. How ripe can we get our fruit? Um, and
Hmm.
uh, and kind of dispel the idea that on like Niagara Peninsula wines um, necessarily completely rely on finesse and elegance. They can be very powerful wines, and that's something that we're working on a lot. And it's a
Hmm.
process. It takes time. Um,
I'm super layman when it comes to wine. Like I enjoy what I enjoy in a very simplistic way. I
mhm.
got to tell you, like I don't have this nose for it and the things that you do to kind of, which I'm sure you folks do. But so I guess I'm curious about if forgive me for sounding super, naive, but if several winemakers in the area have a similar grape, what are the things that make Cave Springs a little different? What are the ways in which you create a little different flavor than the neighboring property or so on and so
Sure.
forth? Like, how does that work in regards to that? Like, I mean, I know you can in beer, you can tinker with hops and different things like that and whatnot.
Mhm.
What are the steps in winemaking that allow you to be so unique within your brand?
That's a really good question. Um,
Yes.
so so number
Sorry.
one, when you're making when you're making wine,
let me say this. He is my son, and I'm going to say he's intelligent too, isn't
yeah,
he?
you
Oh,
should be you should be
that
proud of
came from a
him.
really naive place, that question. So I just want to
He
be
went from
clear
drinking
about
wine on the
that.
couch and watching the Jays in the 18th
Yeah.
inning to
Yeah.
to what's the detail of terroir and winemaking.
Yeah, that's right.
Um, Look, not there's different types of wine, right? Some wines are just made to be very consistent and homogeneous year in, year out. I
Sure.
call
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
sort of brand wines or
Yes.
beverage wines.
Sure.
And if it
It's
works, don't change it, right?
Yeah. What makes wine different from, say, beer and spirits? And spirits has both beer and spirits have this in like spirits are dictated by peat, things like peat with Scotch whiskey, for example. The mash being made from corn or what barley, right? beer with where the hops come from, but they're not really central to the product. When you move up to wines, we say wine of origin, wine that has a specific appellation attached to it. So in our case, most of our wines are VQA, not just Niagara Peninsula, but Beamsville Bench at the higher, more precise level. When you're declaring more narrow points of origin for wine, it's assumed that it's a higher quality wine. So stepping into that realm, what things do we do? Because we have neighbors, like we have great neighbors around us. Like we work really closely with wineries like Malavar, they're right next door to us, Hidden Bench. I can't name them all, Pearl Morissette in our area. And what makes us different from, say, a vineyard right next to us is our approach in the vineyard and in the cellars. And for us, that really boils down to one thing in the vineyard, and that is really pushing, as I mentioned earlier, the boundaries of ripeness,
Mm.
which means a lot of handwork in the vineyard to make sure that your fruit is very sound, meaning healthy, at the point of harvest, and that and so you're not taking shortcuts early in the year that compromise how long you can leave the fruit hanging on the vine. You can really every year, assuming, the worst scenario of lots of rain and humid weather that causes rot, we can weather that, no pun intended, and get to the finish line with the ripest possible fruit. And that fruit will reflect not just our hillside location and the airflow and the water drainage, all the important things in the vineyard that are locked in. They're just our conditions, but also the climate of that year. So
Mhm.
you'll get not just that homogeneous every year, the same sort of style of winemaking, but you'll get wines that vary year to year, and it's sort of a timestamp of vintage.
That's
So
Yes.
interesting.
yeah. And
That
then the other
actually
thing,
opens my brain a little bit because I always, and this is going to, again, sound super naive because I've never really, if you don't know something, you don't know something. The
Mhm,
reason why there's a date on a wine, like a year
mhm.
date, is because that year could have been different than the previous years and created different flavors, is what I'm hearing.
Karen, this guy's like, he's a wine, he's going to be a wine guy. He's asking
I'm
great
in.
questions.
I'm all
Yeah,
in.
you are. You're in the club.
He's not just- he's
Absolutely. You're absolutely
shocking me.
right.
Wait a minute. And
Yeah.
he didn't even go, no, I'm kidding.
Don't
What's
start.
What's most interesting of wine of origin is two things: the specific sites
Yeah.
that the wine comes from, and
Yeah.
secondly, vintage. In our view, and we think sometimes even in fine wine that vintage gets forgotten because there are a lot of regions in the world that are, especially in the New World, that are very warm and they're very consistent. And they're fine wine regions, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
the beauty of our region is, as you know, our summers, they vary, right? It's a variable
Yes.
climate. It's a
Yeah.
moderated continental climate. It's warm enough that vinifera grapes can grow and ripen their fruit. It's cool enough and variable enough that you get a lot of variation year to year. And that's what makes it interesting for even
Right.
when you're watching the Blue Jays. And so, and taking it to the next step, nothing against the Blue Jays, they're great. But the next step in the cellars is if we've done our job and really ripened the fruit and it's sound, meaning, free of any disease,
Right.
um, we can do very, very low intervention winemaking. And that's the other thing that makes Cave Spring pretty distinct from most producers in the region. We don't add anything. We just allow the natural yeasts to drive the fermentation. We don't control the temperature of any of our fermentations. We add a very minimal amount of sulfur at the end, just prior to bottling, but and not
I
during the
love the
vinification.
terminologies he's coming out with,
Yeah. I'm fascinated by all of it. This is great.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
temperature of fermentation, whether you're using natural yeasts that occur on the clusters or you're using a selected yeast to override nature's yeasts, we
Mm.
prefer to let nature drive the process. So we call it natural methods we use, not necessarily to be confused with so-called natural wines, which may be completely, no sulfur added, no additives at all. We do add a little bit of sulfur. That's the only difference. But we're trying to make wines that are very ripe, expressive, with layers of flavor, um, but with methods where, without getting too technical, with the minimal additions we do, the wines can open up over time. Even when you open the bottle, you can leave it on your
Change. Yes.
counter
Yeah. Yeah.
for a
Yeah. Yeah.
week,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's still going to be fresh after a week, even though we
Hmm.
don't add anything to preserve it.
Mm.
And so this is the magic of using, really low intervention winemaking and really precise work in the vineyards to make sure you've got very ripe fruit. So
So it sounds to me like it's all in the setup, right? It's all in
it's
the
all
setup to set it up properly. And then the grand flourish at the end, when everything works properly at the beginning, all of it at the end
yeah.
comes together. What I'm loving about what you're saying is just the lack of intervention. That's a really cool process and a really cool
Mhm.
mindset to be able to do something that is, I guess, just more natural, which is probably how winemaking was intended in the beginning anyway.
Yeah, there's been a lot of since about the post-war period in winemaking, like in every food and
Mm,
beverage industry, there's a lot of technology. We get
yeah.
emails every day from all the high technology yeasts that can overcome this problem, that problem during your
Mm,
fermentation, especially this time of the year, because winemakers get stuck with problems with the vinification. And we stepped back from all that. We were always low intervention, but about 15 years ago, we really stepped back and said, how can we eliminate intervention even further? And it's amazing when you put your head to that, how and you start to move in a certain direction. Things fell away so fast. We used to control the fermentation of our white wines with temperature, right? We wanted to ferment cool. That's what you're taught in wine school. And it was like, okay, what makes white wine different from red? We don't control red wine fermentations.
mm,
So we started experimenting with letting white wines ferment. It's much more sustainable. We don't have to cool liquid, which uses a lot of electricity, power. And B, we found out that doing natural fermentations using indigenous yeasts that are on the berries, they really liked a warmer temperature. They
mm.
were sometimes struggling at cooler temperatures. And it allowed us to be more sustainable on the power consumption side. Um, B, to make a better wine in the end. The wine had more texture, had a more
Interesting.
more of a kind of richness on the palate by this one simple tweak. We tried it 1 year and we never looked back. We do it with all of our white wines now, so we don't treat them different from reds. We also let the white wines, red wine gets its color from allowing the juice and skin to ferment together, right? During the fermentation. So we've always allowed a lot of skin contact with the white wines as well. So people that know our white wines know that they have like a pretty rich color, and darker than most sort of more commercial white wines would have. And that's partly because we allow a lot of skin contact during fermentation. Again, what's different with white wine from red wine? Why not allow your fermentation techniques to be crossing over between the types of grapes? And these are
This is
questions that we were, I'm going to say, brave enough to ask and act on, but it takes a skepticism about accepted
Yeah.
norms to do so.
this is scientific artwork is what this is.
Yeah, you're right.
This is very cool, right?
Oh
Because
man,
you're
thanks for
So,
coming
thinking
up
it.
you're coming up with thoughts and processes based on the previous iterations of what you're doing and kind of diverting slightly to say, is this going to be better? So it sounds
yeah,
like it's a constant evolution. While there are some products that that you have probably, your main brands you've mentioned, your main
they're consistent. They're consistent
consistency,
brands.
there's always room for what's next, what can we do now, what are we going to have fun with now, you know what I mean, that kind of thing. And that's
Yeah,
where
it's
the
So,
the fun
so
sciencey brain comes in.
are you a producer of ice wines also?
yeah. We make ice wine from Riesling, which is, I would argue, most wine professionals would concur the finest variety to make ice wine from. It's the variety that in Germany centuries ago the process was discovered by some monks who found some grapes that they left in the vineyard into early winter, and they froze in their on the vine, and they picked it, pressed it, and voila, you had ice wine. So we do make small quantities of it. It's one of the great dessert wines of the world, I think.
Yeah,
And we've
it's
made it since, almost, I think, 3 years into our winery's establishment, we started making ice wine. And we also make
oh,
a select late harvest Riesling as well. So
You
yeah.
you mentioned the
So,
word sustain. Oh, go ahead, Karen. You go next. I've been asking all the
okay.
questions. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I want to move into another area instead of that, because what attracted me about because I'm not really a wine drinker. I'm not a drinker at all. So I'm not a connoisseur, but the thing that attracted me about your winery was that you ran events and situations that entice people to come to your winery, which
Mhm.
I thought was brilliant. And so who was the person that actually came up with that idea?
Uh, well, first of all, stepping back to Justin's comments there about the combination of art and science, you're bang on there. It is an artisanal undertaking, but it really brings together the creative, artistic dimension of the maker and science because there are limits. You're working within the bounds of science. So, Karen, to answer your question, I think it was a team thing, but we've had for a couple of decades a lady named Dee Dee Cowan, who's been our tasting room uh, manager and director of kind of our on-site winery activities and sales. And it's been a team thing, but Dee Dee's been really instrumental in constantly thinking about events that can draw people. And it's no secret, it's the so-called experiential economy these days. Um,
Yeah.
I
I would
sometimes
agree with
struggle to,
that. People want experiences with
they
their
do.
tied to things. Yes.
Yeah,
They do,
yeah,
but what does that mean?
and I think it's
What
I
does
think
that
it's
mean?
important to make it fun and
Yes.
Yeah.
to and I think that that's where you what you were doing and what you are doing and I love it. I think it's I've never been. I apologize, but I never and I will make it out there. But
Yeah.
I have encouraged my clients constantly to go there and do the and experience these situations there. So
We're really fortunate. Cave Spring Vineyard itself is one of the more I'm going to go as far as it is spectacular, really. It's picturesque. Niagara is generally picturesque, but because we're perched up high on the Niagara Escarpment, I didn't talk earlier about that, but we're just a few kilometers from the lake. You can see the lake directly from our tasting room. You look back
right.
south, you see this escarpment cliff of the Beamsville Bench, that portion of the Niagara Escarpment, which is very unique. There's only about maybe a 1 to 2 kilometer stretch where you have a very steep limestone cliff, um, covered in Carolinian forests. The site was named by for these magnesium springs and caves in the limestone of the escarpment that are right there. So you look back at the escarpment, you look north to the lake. On a clear day, you can see the skyline of the city in the distance, 40 kilometers away. It's a remarkable site. So we have a built-in, attraction, I guess.
Sure.
But wine is not simple, and you want to be able to communicate to people. And there's a mystery to wine, and so that's the other attraction. They want to come, they want to learn about wine without it being
Yeah,
quote
yeah.
unquote education. I don't like that. They want to come away learning something about why they enjoy wine, and that's what we try to do with the events. Because everything's an experience, even if you just go to a traditional tasting bar and taste 5 wines on a tasting bar, the way it used to be. That's an experience too, but now it's more sit down, take your time. We curate flights. We match the wines with little light bites like charcuterie boards and things like that. And then we have the events to supplement things. And it can be simple as live music on our patio at the tasting room at the vineyard. So we have 2 tasting rooms. We have one in Jordan Village where the winery is, but our main one is at the vineyard on Cave Spring Road in Beamsville, and that's really the one I would recommend people go to. It's a beautiful site.
Do you host private events at the venues too?
Yeah, we do. We
Very
work a
cool.
lot. We work with v vintage hotels they're based in Niagara on the Lake, but
Yeah.
they own the Inn on the 20, which is in Jordan Village where our winery is.
Yep.
Yeah.
And they work with us, and they do a lot of weddings in our at the vineyard site. It's extremely popular in the wedding scene these days. I'll say our vineyard in particular, but many sites throughout the region for having weddings that are among the vines. We definitely
Mm.
work work on that front, and then we do also corporate events and things like that. We have a small space at the vineyard where we can host those things.
So
Mhm.
what would you say would be next for Cave Springs? Like what's next on the docket? What's the next
Mm.
evolution? What's the next thing that we're going to see?
Next is this is a great question because I'm very much a process thinker. It's the process, not the finish, that drives me, and I'm always most interested in the wines that we're making and aren't even out yet. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Because I know that every year we're doing things.
Okay, so
Every
what's the
vintage is
next thing?
new.
Come on,
The
Tom.
next thing is pushing the boundaries even further. Sounds like a cliche, but I'm really pushing the boundaries of ripeness in the vineyard and getting wines that kind of belie the impression of what Niagara can be as lighter, more delicate wines. That these are wines that are powerful and deep and concentrated and can really, really open people's eyes that, hey, yeah, a Cabernet Franc from the Niagara Peninsula can have every bit as much depth and nuance and power as a great Cabernet Sauvignon from California. Inevitably a
Mhm,
little bit
mhm.
more delicate, but probably more complex in ways. Um, that are Rieslings that very few places in the world can make dry Riesling, and that we can make dry Riesling with the best handful of regions in Germany and France and Austria that can make the world's finest dry Rieslings. Um, Stylistically, people have tended to make Rieslings more off dry and sweeter, but we really believe that we can make amazing dry white wines with Riesling. These are things that we're pushing. Our vineyard collection is really in place. If a piece comes up for sale near us, we're always interested to purchase. But we've been at it 50 years, and those opportunities come up occasionally. But we know our
Yeah,
sites. We just want to keep focusing on how we can make the wines better from those sites. Part of that we have wines that are multi-vineyard, usually made from two sites. And then we have all the single vineyard wines from Cave Spring Vineyard. And we're constantly learning what the best parcels are and what are called crus, the micro parcels, the hearts of those parcels that make the top wines. So the vineyard selection process is something that over the next, decade will continue to evolve so that a wine like, say, our top Riesling, the CSV, which is known internationally, it's made from three crus, three individual small, like 1 acre micro parcels.
yeah.
And that mix of crus changes every few years based on vine age, based on what we learn about the sites. And that's super exciting because every year this year we dropped one out and we brought a new one in. And that's like, at the speed of wine, that's a big thing. Like one of our crus is now declassified down into the wine below, and one other one came up. It's a bit like building the pitching staff for the Blue Jays. You've got guys on the farm system. You got a Trey Savage down in Buffalo or wherever, you bring him up, and all of a sudden he's a starter and he's making your top. He's playing the World Series. The same thing. Our crew wines are our World Series wines. So
Cool.
it's exciting to learn the land and figure out which sites are the best slivers, morsels of our vineyard.
This
Soil
is
has
this is genuinely one.
sorry,
Go ahead. Go
sorry.
ahead, Karen.
Just one, soil has a lot to do with it, Tom.
hmm Yeah, it can be right around our tasting room. I always show people because it's right there. We have about a 4 acre parcel of Pinot Noir. And I picked that one because it's right beside our tasting room. And it wraps around the tasting room. And I say to people, this is about 4.5 acres of Pinot Noir. But if you look over there in the distance, see the little yellow flags on some end posts in the vineyard? There's 6 rows there, and that is a cru. That is the sliver of Pinot Noir that goes into our top Pinot Noir called CSV.
Hmm.
And and then they say, so what makes that different? It looks the same as all the rest of it. I say, well, let's look at it closer. And I point out how the elevation, it's only like a couple of meters higher than the rest of the parcel, but it that makes a difference for water drainage and airflow that allows the fruit to hang longer there and ripen longer. And that's really a detail that you learn with time.
Yeah.
And soil
So
is important, of course, for drainage.
Mhm.
So from my perspective and kind of again just outside looking into the industry, it really feels like you guys are some of the OGs as it were of the industry in Ontario and that Niagara region, and it really you can just based on this conversation, what I love is hearing the passion in your voice for what you do, and understanding the industry as much as you do and bringing that kind of simplistic version of it to someone like me who can actually absorb it and not be scared of it. Cause I think one of the things that a lot of people get caught up in is, oh, if I'm going to go to these wine tastings, is it snooty or is there
Mhm.
kind of an arrogance about it? This does not feel that way. It feels like you guys love the business. You want people to try this stuff. You want people to understand that it's good wine. And, from my perspective, I think good wine is in the eye of the beholder in a way. Like the
Mhm.
person drinking it is the one that's going to determine for themselves if they enjoy or don't enjoy a glass of wine,
Mhm.
depending on where it comes from. And that's okay. It's what, like any good art piece of art, right? Your people are going to perceive it in their own way. And I appreciate your mentality behind, everything you've done, quite
Well,
frankly. It's impressive.
I think Tom has a great passion. I mean, just the way he speaks of the and you're obviously extremely learned and want to, as you say, want to drive to a further goal. And that to me is wonderful because you'll probably invent something that nobody's ever invented again.
Oh,
Just
Well, you're right. Wine can seem intimidating, and we try to, um, you know, strip that away a little bit. In the end, it is fermented grapes. And our job is to ripen those grapes as well as we can and step away and let them show the place that they were grown on. It's that simple. And, if someone goes to a Michelin star restaurant, there's going to be the food critic and the real foodies who are going to be analyzing every ingredient that went into that course, the wine match and all of that. And then there's people who just go and, like you, watching the Blue Jays game on the couch, they just take in the food and enjoy everything, the atmosphere, the sophisticated presentation, but really you're not analyzing everything. So we get people who just love really good wine and they've been
Mhm.
customers in some cases for decades. And they just come because they love the wines and they like the story, but they're not kind of obsessed with every technical detail about the wines. And then we get people who are on every shade of gray in between, me and our winemaker, et cetera, and the person who just likes the wine and wants to enjoy it. And you just have to learn, what's their limit? What do they want to, what higher level of knowledge do they want to step away with? And some it's really high, some it's in between. And it's our job to sort of uh,
So the image
learn
that
that.
the image a lot of people have, and it's obviously not today, but when I was in Portugal, it was interesting because I was with a friend of mine, and he has a group of friends that have a winery, and it's a small winery. And we went into one building, and they were actually stepping on the grapes, and
We do the
it's
same. We do the same thing.
no kidding,
Yeah, yeah. By the way,
isn't
Portugal's a
that?
great, an amazing that's a great wine culture, and
Yeah,
their
yeah.
their 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 wines have made immense progress in the last 10 or 15 years, 20 years. But um,
But
yeah,
that's the image that
we
everybody has, isn't it?
look. That's another aspect. Like with our top red wines, our winemaker Gabe DeMarco, who's a brilliant young winemaker, um, foot stomps for a reason. It's not just a romantic thing, although it can be seen as that. It's when you're making smaller batches of wine, and for example, with red wine, sometimes you have the clusters. You don't separate the berries from the clusters. It's called whole clusters. You put the whole clusters in a fermentation bin, and it's very important not to, for want of a better word, brutalize those when you're gently pressing them. And it's just as easy and efficient to do it by foot with a big pair of wellies on and just get in there and feel them and not not press them too hard and go back in 6 hours later and do it again and just get the right level of extraction. And that's super important in how the wine will finish at the end. So it is a very artisanal, romantic act, but it is technically as good as any machine you could invent that would try to do this mechanically. It's
Yeah,
better.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I thought it was
very
great. I
cool.
thought it was
Yeah.
fantastic. We learned I learned a lot that day, and it was quite amazing the whole
Mhm.
process. And
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
No, that's it's an incredible story of, a family building something pretty amazing, and I'm very impressed. And, considering we have that family connection with Karen and I building our business together as well, it's a really cool a story, and I really appreciate it, Tom. We're gonna put all of your details below in a link in the
Sure.
chat. So if anybody wants to join any of the events or see any of the upcoming events or go for a wine tasting or just go for a
Yeah.
drive down and see the winery, by all means, go take a look at Cave Springs Winery. It's,
Pop in at
Beamsville's not that far.
cavespring.ca.
What is
Pop
it?
in at cavespring.ca for anyone that wants to visit us. We have the two tasting rooms. Highly recommend the vineyard tasting room. But if you're in Jordan Village shopping or just staying overnight or whatever, we have a nice tasting room there as well, right at the winery.
Perfect.
So
That's
Yeah.
amazing. Thank you, Tom. Appreciate it.
Thank you so
Thanks
much
for listening,
for coming
everybody.
Yeah,
on,
no problem. Appreciate you inviting me.
Have a great
And come and
and
see me sometime at the winery.
I will still continue to put your newsletter right out to our raving fans and on our newsletter, and it just pleases me to do that. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right, everyone.
All
Thanks
right.
for
Have a great,
watching.
yeah.
See ya.